Hey everybody, this is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today we're talking with Andrew Laws, founder of SEO.io SEO agency and host of the Business Amplifier podcast. I'm super excited because we're all looking for ways to grow our awareness for our businesses and our brands, and both SEO and podcasting are absolutely great ways to do that. So with that, welcome, Andrew. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me here, Brett. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking to you. I think you have a really interesting background, some fascinating hobbies.
Oh, yeah.
So I have a lot of stuff I want to ask you about, but can we start off with your personal story? Can you share your background with us and how you started your career?
Sure thing. So I started my career some time ago, as my white hair might reveal. I originally started in SEO. I started learning about it in about 1998. I was working for an American guy who just left the American military here in the UK. And we were building servers. We would build servers and then drive them to like industrial estates around Britain and plug them into the internet. And from that point, we started building websites using just Notepad or Front Page or something. And I realized one day that no one was going to find these websites unless we found a way of putting them in front of people. And that's when I started to look at Alta Vista and Hotbot and Ask Jeeves and other search engines back then, and thought, you know what? If these websites could appear when people search for things, it sounds bizarre to say it now, but this was like a new concept back then. Unfortunately, that company wound up because it turns out building servers and putting them on the internet doesn't really make you much money, or it certainly didn't back then. And I ended up with a load of them stuck in my house. But anyway, that's a story for another time. So I went and worked in central London for a not-for-profit as their website controller, which is another job title that sounds now like it's from the Victorian era. And I was there a brief while, and then I started up my first company, but not for the reasons that people normally start companies. So I think people normally start companies because they're like, hey, I want to change the world. I want to be rich, maybe. I was playing in a really ratty punk band, and we were starting to tour around the UK, playing like Birmingham on a Tuesday to no people and no money, and living in a van. And you can't do that and have a full-time job. So I chanced my arm and I asked my employer, I said, look, I'm going to start my own company because I want to go and not get paid to play bad music. And I'd like to keep you as a client. A complete chance in my arm, really just kind of thinking, this is crazy. I mean, who would say that? Who would say, hey, you're an employee, we'll pay you potentially more and have completely change the role? And they said, yeah, okay, brilliant. Go for it. Have fun playing bass guitar to people who don't care. They didn't actually say that, but so that was 25 years ago, and here I still am.
That's wild, and it's funny because I remember, so I'm dating myself too. I had a brick and mortar business back in the late 90s. And what was fascinating about it to me is, to your point, websites were going up, e-commerce was sort of just starting, but nobody really understood even how it worked. And so the idea, I think was pretty much, if you put something online, you just assumed because there wasn't the competition there is nowadays, that I guess people would find it. And it sounds silly, obviously, but that was sort of the mentality, because you didn't know about any of the other side of it. You just knew about setting it up was the big heavy lift. That was the hard thing, getting the thing even online. And even at that point, there was all that battling going back and forth between even the web browsers, right? You had web crawler, and then i1.com tried that little startup thing where they were giving money away if people used their, and so you had all of,
I forgot all about that. Wow.
Yeah. Well, the reason I knew specifically about i1.com is I was working for a consulting company in the late 90s in New York, and we were based in Santa Clara, California, but we had consultants at all of these .coms. And we had a couple of guys leave to take stock options at i1.com. And so I just thought it was so funny because they were giving away like $10,000 or $100,000 a day for somebody who was searching, and it was a random prize drawing. And the idea was they were going to get all these people to come in. And so it was sort of the wild. You had all this stuff competing to see what was going to end up coming out on top. And now, obviously, all of that stuff is very mature, and we're at a point where now putting something online, I mean, you might as well just throw a pebble in the ocean. Like by itself, no one's got any idea, right? And so it is fascinating how things evolve, but it's an interesting story for you too, because like you said, a lot of people, it's either I wanted to change the world or I was forced into it because I was doing something and I saw that there was an opportunity there. For you, it was sort of a different motivation. So what was it that got you to focus on SEO? Was it just the intuitive idea that no one's going to find these sites?
The thing that properly got me into it, so I had about 2 years of learning about it, absorbing it, but then the thing that really got me into it was I started a button badge making company, by which I mean, I'll keep the story short, but the band that I was playing in, we want to buy button badges. I'm trying to think, you don't always call them button badges in the States. Pins, making pins.
Pins. Sure.
And so I bought a machine, which was about, I don't know, $600, and I had no money for anything else. So I thought, right, if I build a website, that's how I'll get the work. And there was two massive companies in Europe at the time. They completely dominated. And I thought, yeah, but they haven't got what I've got. They don't understand the way that search engines work. So within a few months, the website went to #1. And I actually sold the company because it turns out I'm not very good at making pin badges. But that company's still at #1 in Google 25 years later. And the office studio that I'm speaking to you from is their spare room. They keep me here like a pet. I haven't owned any other
Wow.
company for years, but they sort of keep me here like a benevolent granddad or something. But so that was it. It was the David versus Goliath thing. And it's still what I get a kick out of now. If you start a business and if you've got a really good idea and you've got enthusiasm and you're willing to look at things in a sort of a quite a sort of systematic way, you can beat anybody. Any major brand that you can think of, you can beat it. And I still believe that. It's just a little trickier now.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, look, I know that there's a lot of confusion around SEO. I know even for me, and I've been in digital marketing 20 years, it's been something I've sort of, I wouldn't say avoided, but it's something I never leaned into because I always felt I knew some guys that had server farms. They were doing like they're backlinking to each other, but you had to have different IP, second level IP addresses. Otherwise, the search engines know that you're, and so I always felt as though it was such a moving target because the rules kept changing that it was difficult. I mean, I remember the days of keyword stuffing. I remember the days of a white page with the same word repeated 100 times, but in white text, so you couldn't see it, but the search engine could read it, right? And so you'd shoot to #1, and then it was all backlinks, and everybody was just getting all these things linking into each other, and they were all trading all these links, and like any good company or technology, those companies figured it out and said this is a scam, right? You're not doing anything authentic to add value here. You're just doing something to manipulate the system. And so I think because of that, I had a lot of confusion around it. And I think nowadays I understand it a lot better, but I think a lot of people still are confused about it. So can you just in layman's terms, like just explain what's the value of SEO to somebody who's wondering, what the heck is this? And when it's done right, like what kind of impact can it have on our business and our brand?
Absolutely. I can summarize SEO in a fairly short sentence. SEO is brilliant at amplifying your excellence and terrible at conjuring nonsense. So if you have a brilliant company to start with, if you have a company that looks after people and is free and open with information and just wants to, I mean, genuinely wants to make the web and the world better, you can probably never speak to somebody in SEO ever. And you can just run your company in a fantastic way and put out loads of information in there in an incredibly logical way. And you'd never have to speak to someone like me. The other side of it is if you want to take a shortcut And if you think SEO is a way of kind of pulling the wool over the eyes of search engines and fooling Google into thinking you're more important than you are, then what you're going to do is spend an awful lot of money and mainly have some small gains for a short while. Then you're going to nosedive off a cliff. And as you say, SEO has been broadly split into two camps. I don't like the phrases, but there's white hat, which is people like me, and then black hat, which is people who work very hard and do have some success to fool Google. So each time Google has an update, it's generally to sniff out more of the wrong uns, to kind of find more of the bad type of SEO. Fortunately, I'm not a very, very smart person. So from the start, each time I looked into black hat things, just kind of out of curiosity, like watching an episode of Oprah when someone's going to confess to some crime or something, kind of look like, what is this? I'd look at it and I think, this looks like an awful and large amount of work. And for me and any of my clients, if they had, an exact amount of resource, because everyone's got a limited amount of resource, I thought you could spend that resource, that time, that money trying to fool Google, or you could just run a really good company and just make sure that the search engines, including Google and now ChatGPT and all the AI, just make sure they really understand how excellent you are. So that's it. SEO is for amplifying excellence. It can't have that awful saying, you can't polish a turd. SEO will not make a bad company good. It can't. You just can't.
Yeah, and look, I like the just how frank you are with that and transparent, because I do think it's super important. And I sort of went through that same feeling when I looked at all those things. First of all, it just didn't resonate with who I am, looking at ways to try to trick stuff. But the other part of it is, like you said, I felt like you're going to be on this, escalator going down, trying to run up. So every time, you might get to the top, but you're going to come zooming right back down. Then you got to keep running again.
That's
And
brilliant.
it felt mentally exhausting. The idea of trying to just manipulate things and trick them. And so to the extent that it was something that was amplifying what you're doing genuinely, there's value in that. And the thing is, you don't ever have to look over your shoulder, right? Because even if there's competition, if you're doing things the right way and you're building things the right way, you have a market, you have an audience for what you're doing. And so why do you need to get into, sort of tricks and all that other kind of stuff? I mean, everybody wants to know the shortest way to get to where they want to go. There's no doubt about that. Nobody wants to take the long way around. At the same time, when you cross the line and you start doing things that are designed to be manipulative and done in a way that aren't considered, nothing that you would ever share with them, because it isn't something that they would accept, then you're definitely playing in a game where you're going to have to constantly keep evolving and reworking it and redoing it. And so, I mean, yeah, that makes a lot of logical sense. So, in working with a lot of clients, being in the game so long, what are the big mistakes that you see people make when they set out to do SEO?
It's probably still buying backlinks. So just to be really clear, don't buy backlinks. There's a whole industry now set out to kind of, they're even on LinkedIn, and they're legitimate companies. I'm not saying these are kind of fraudsters. They have set up a service that they offer and they perform, but it's not one I want any part of. And it must look so enticing, especially to people who start a business or find themselves have with marketing responsibility thrust upon them. Sometimes you find people in companies who have been promoted, and then they get a tap on the shoulder from the CEO. Oh, you do marketing now, and they're like, I do what? And they search for help on SEO, and the first thing that comes up might well be buy backlinks. Just don't do it. I mean, Google doesn't really punish anyone. That's sort of an odd way of sort of describing the fact that if you do buy backlinks and if you do black hat SEO now, Google doesn't punish you. They just ignore you. You're just like the kid at the party who's been screaming for so long that all the all the other kids have stopped paying attention to them. It's that. Don't be that guy. Be the guy in the middle of the party handing out the gift bags and asking people if they want more cake and making sure everyone's comfortable and having a good time. Because ultimately, that's all Google's really looking for online. They're looking for the North Stars. They're looking for the authoritative people. They're looking for the most helpful people. They even called one of their biggest recent updates the helpful content update. It's a myth that I hit up against all the time when I go out and do, speak to business groups about SEO. One of the things that people almost always say is, how do you keep track of it? How do you keep track of all the changes? And we do keep half an eye on them, but we tend to ignore them because all the changes on Google ever really say is do good stuff. It's like Bill and Ted. Be excellent to each other. There you go. I think I've got my new SEO slogan, be excellent to each other.
Yeah, I do like that, and I do think it again. It makes it linear. It makes it simple, because if instead of trying to manipulate, you're just trying to create and provide value, then at the end of the day, you don't have to overly concern yourself with that kind of thing. If I think we have a tendency, especially in digital marketing, I've noticed this. I coach a lot of entrepreneurs, and one of the things that I see a lot is we have a tendency to overcomplicate. We want to believe that there's some sort of secret formula for digital marketing, and that at the end of the day, it's all about these tactics and wild new ideas. And at the end of the day, it's an exchange of value, right? If I have something that's of value and you think it's worth more than the money you have in your pocket, you're going to give me the money in your pocket to get it. If you don't, then you're not. And it isn't going to matter what closing technique or what sort of lipstick I put on the pig, as they say, right? It's not going to help if it isn't legit, if it isn't real, because even if you're able to short term make some sales, even if short term you're able to fool some people, at the end of the day, that stuff's just going to come back on you. We live in a world now that's so connected. Information flows so easily. It's no longer corporations dictating to people what they're able to buy, purchase, and want. It's people saying, this is what I want. If you provide it for me, I'm willing to pay you the premium for it. If you don't, I'm going elsewhere. Mm. And because it's a consumer driven market at this point, the only way to build, I think, a successful business is to focus on what the consumer wants, what your audience, what your target audience wants, and do the best you can to provide it for them. And if you're doing that, I think all the other things will sort of align with it really, really well. And so it is fascinating, but it is amazing to me too, how sometimes we work so hard to bend ourselves into pretzels to figure out the secret to something, when the only secret really is just be real and provide real value. And that's the biggest secret of all, I think.
Brett, there are no big secrets, right? There are efficiencies, and that's where digital marketing is incredible. It's absolutely brilliant. I love reading old books about marketing. So David Ogilvy, who's really famous kind of marketer he started in the 50s.
Yeah.
I read through his and he's going, here's how you scientifically test a campaign. And after 6 months, you should have a direction. I'm like, okay, with paid click adverts, we can do that testing in 24 hours. That's where it's cool. Right. That's where it's exciting. But if you think about it, it's just occurred to me that if the only way to succeed in digital marketing was genuinely to have this little secret black book of top secret things, then any company that was established before digital marketing became a thing would no longer exist. Yeah. IBM still exists. A lot of very large companies still exist because they are still using the core foundation of their reason of being that came into play possibly 100, sometimes 200 years ago. Digital marketing is great, but it's not gonna make magic from nothing. It's not gonna, right. Did you say put lipstick on the pig? Or like I've never heard that before.
Yeah, that's the expression I heard. It's not mine. I don't know who I borrowed it from, but I've heard it before. Yeah. And yeah, no, it's really true. I mean, at the end of the day, For some reason, there's this black box effect with the internet where people feel like all it really does is accelerate and compress the time. Like you said, I learned a lot actually from Jay Abraham, another marketing legend, and he's still around, but he's from an older school thing where they did a lot of direct mail, they did TV, same idea, right? Oh, he would write these long form letters, all text, and publish it in like a newspaper, and people would say, you're crazy, that's never going to work. He said, look, if there's value there, and I catch people with the first sentence and I'm telling them something they're interested in and want to know about, they'll read every last word. And he was right. He did all these direct mail campaigns where he'd send out these 20 pages of text, very little, very few images or anything, pretty to look at, but it was so compellingly written. And I mean, he made, millions and millions of dollars for companies doing these sort of campaigns that people, but it's the same idea. You print up the stuff, then you've got to mail it out, then you've got to wait, and you already had to spend all that money. And before you even know whether it worked, you're already on your next batch. So you're 2 batches in, you have a giant investment before you even know whether what you're doing is working. And then you find out. And so, I mean, that was, and now with the internet, we've just compressed all that. We've shrunk down what the buy-in is for budget, and we made it so much faster in terms of the direct response, which is great. So I guess that leads really well into the idea of, the burning question that people have today about SEO is, what impact does AI have on all that? And is SEO going to stay relevant in the future because of that, or is it dead, as some people have said?
The first book on digital marketing that I published was in, I think, 2003, and I called it SEO is Dead, because back then so many people were going on about SEO is dead. I thought, hey, that'll make a good title for a book. So yeah, claiming SEO is dead has been happening since the start. I think there's two sides to this story. I think some people are losing faith in, or are not as driven to explore SEO, because they think that, well, now we don't need all these expensive tools like Ahrefs and SEMrush, or expensive human beings like SEO agencies, or of course we're good value, we're not expensive, because AI can do it for us. So they'll go to ChatGPT and just say, do an SEO. Here's my website, do an SEO. And yeah, those tools can be useful if you train them well and you understand the quality of the output, whether it's good. If you can tell the difference between like a Babe Ruth bar and a dog poo, then you're probably going to be able to spot good output from bad output. Sorry, that was the only American chocolate bar I could think of the name of. It's only from the Goonies. So there's that side of it. People going, hey, well, I don't need consultants now. I'm just going to use ChatGPT. And that sort of reminds me of an episode of The Simpsons where their dog's sick, Santa's little helper's sick, and Marge sees Homer reading a book and says, Homer, you are not going to do that operation yourself. And he's reading like a book, like how to operate on dogs. It's not quite as severe as that, but that's kind of what you're going to get if you just rely wholly on AI or any sort of LLM for your SEO. So that's one side of it. We'll put that in a little box for now. We'll just say, okay, well, that's over there. That's kind of quite complex. There's lots of layers that you could dig into with that. The other aspect to the relevance of AI comes down to where AIs like ChatGPT get their information from. So I think there's an assumption at the moment of there's no point in doing SEO because AI, that's now where people ask questions, and it's like 7% market share now, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot. People don't go to Google, people don't use AltaVista or Hotbot or whatever anymore. They just chat and ask, and I say, yeah, of course they do. And then people say, but even on Google, you ask a question and it has the AI overview at the top of the page. That means people don't go through to your website. Okay, that's absolutely correct. But there was a bit of research recently carried out by SEMrush, which, as a caveat, is an SEO platform, to look how reliant ChatGPT was for information on your website compared to Google. So if somebody asks a question relevant to your company, so that's about your brand, about your topic or anything, ChatGPT gets 80% of the information it then regurgitates from your website, not from its brain. It doesn't think. It comes from your website, and it's getting better at checking it all the time. If you compare that to Google, when people search for something in Google, and Google returns a result that is about your brand, about your topic, they only rely for about 40% of their information from your website, because they've got access to lots and lots of other bits of data. So SEO is now more important than ever before, because no AI chat can just conjure up this information. It still has to get it from somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's still a relatively new thing that things like I'm just going to stick with ChatGPT. It's like, otherwise I'm just going to end up going, oh, the many AIs. It's a relatively new thing that it can go out and look and get fresh information, but that's going to become so much more common than it currently is. So that means that the interface between your company and people searching for things is actually now more efficient than it was when Google search was the only real thing. And that means the information on your website, the way you structure it, how clear it is, the way you present it in a way that search engines and AI understand, is now much more important than it ever used to be. Your website is not going to succeed because you've got to put a picture of the office dog on it. It's what we used to do in about 1998. What should we put on your website? I don't know. The dog? Yeah.
That is amazing though, and it's a really clear explanation of why it's important, and and how it's all structured, so people can really understand. Okay, here's the value of it, and this is why you need what you need in order to make this work. But yeah, at the end of the day, right? There's always going to be people searching for solutions to their problems and searching for things. So the idea that somehow regardless of how search itself evolves, there's still going to be that ask and tell, right? Because there has to be. You can't intuitively know every answer and every resource that's available for every need that you've got. So you're going to have to go out and find those answers somewhere. And if you're doing it in an online world, you still have options that are relatively limited in the sense of, is a search engine, right? Or it's AI or something like that. And so if you have the ability on the other side of that as a solution provider to be able to feed that with good information, then likely you're going to be able to match up with the people that need what you have to offer. So what advice would you have for a business owner or an entrepreneur that says, okay, I want to use SEO to grow my business, but I don't even know where to start? What should they be doing first?
They should go and speak to their sales team, because the joy of SEO, and this is something I really preach, is that you can do well in SEO with no technical knowledge. Think about it as humans understanding humans. So the reason I tell people to go speak to their sales team is if you speak to anyone who's sold for a company, it doesn't have to be a whole team, anyone who's sold for a company, and that includes the business owner, I will say to them, what are the questions that people ask you just before they give you money, just before they sign a contract, just before they commit to whatever it is you want them to commit to? Start by answering those questions on your website and be very literal about it. If you're selling mattresses and the question people ask is, I don't know, how long's the warranty on a mattress? Then write an article with the title, how long's the warranty on a mattress? And then write the answer using the language and using the information that your best performing salesperson would use. Because that's it. That's really all there is. That's the absolute simplest way to do SEO. Don't worry too much about keyword research. Don't worry about backlinks. Don't worry about how fast your site is. Don't worry about there is literally thousands of technical SEO things we look at, but we only tend to have to do those in very competitive niches. If you're running a bricks and mortar store in a town with less than 50,000 residents, then just start by writing a couple of blog posts a week that answer the questions your customers have for you. The only reason I say to start with the ones that are very close to a close or a conversion is that they're the ones that are going to get you money. But a time will come where you've run out of those questions. You start working your way backwards along the, I don't like to use the words funnel, but we kind of have to. You start working your way backwards along the funnel. And if you get to the stage where you're writing articles about things like pocket sprung mattresses versus waterbeds, what's better for sciatica or bad backs, if you get to that stage, then that means the other end of your funnel is going to be so incredibly productive and so brilliant at getting people that, so much closer to a close, that when people ring your company, the sales guy will pick up and go, how many do you want? 10. I'll put you for 10. Thank you. Because they won't have to convince anyone, because you've built so much trust into the process. We're calling this SEO, but this is the way medieval street markets worked. It's literally like, it's as old as mankind itself. I have questions. Who will answer my questions truthfully? You will. Well, I've read 5 blog posts on your site about mattresses now. I've built trust with you. I don't think that's the way people think in there. They don't say that to themselves, but that's all we're doing. We're building enough trust so that the purchasing decision becomes absolutely frictionless.
Yeah, that's great. And really well put. I mean, I think that really is the key. I always tell people, if you're presenting something, whatever questions you're getting at the end, those are your objections. You want to take anything that's common there, bake it back into your presentation for next time. So that way you're preemptively taking care of all those issues. And what you'll find is over time, you get fewer and fewer questions and more, credit cards or payment slips or whatever else, because people get to a point where they say, okay, yeah, I get it. The value's there. So in growing a company, obviously a lot of people start off as solopreneurs. You start off by yourself, and then you realize pretty quickly, if you're successful at all, that you're going to hit a ceiling. There's only so much that one person's going to be able to do. Do you have any tips for growing a company or adding team members or talent to our business in terms of the best way to do that?
The way that I've had the most success is to find people who are not exactly the same as me. I've already got one of me. I really don't need another one of me. Finding people who aren't exactly like me, but are probably ethically aligned. For my SEO agency, I have no interest in how much SEO knowledge people have before I hire them. I'm looking for people who have curiosity, who have kind of like a mind that wants to figure out how things work, and a mind that wants to help people. If they've got those two things, the background they come from is completely irrelevant. The last person I took on as an employee, she's actually a concert pianist, and I partly took her on because she's also a qualified proofreader, which is really useful in an SEO agency, but zero SEO knowledge. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And it's only been a couple of years. She now points things out to me. Andrew, do you think we should be having a look at this? And I'm like, yes, we should. Absolutely. So, yeah, I think enthusiasm overrules absolutely everything. Anything else can be aligned to your business culture if you've got a strong culture that the person likes in the first place.
Yeah, I like that. And that definitely resonates with me. I mean, you can teach skills. You can't teach, things like work ethic or things like, values, and those kinds of things are things that people, and enthusiasm, those kinds of traits you have or you don't. You could fake it, but if it isn't who you are, it will become difficult, right? After a little bit of time, the minute that there's a rough patch, or there's a minute that something doesn't go the way you want, all of a sudden that enthusiasm saps and you're back to who you really are. And, for better or worse, it's not a judgment. It's just the fact that you do want to align people with, align your business with people that are all pulling in the same direction, because you can teach competencies and skills if somebody's got the right mindset, mentality, and openness to do it. It's very difficult to teach the other stuff. And I've seen examples of both. I've seen people come in, like you said, with very little experience, but be very successful. And I've seen people were still scratching their head 6 months later after the person was gone from the company, saying they were perfect. I don't get it. It's because they had the skills, but they weren't a fit from the culture standpoint. And so it never meshed. And when you're on the inside of a company, especially a good sized company, if you're on the team, you can usually sniff this out right away. Somebody comes into the team and you can just tell that they don't fit. And you say to yourself, I'm going to be shocked if this person lasts, just because of the way that, and 9 times out of 10, that intuition is right, because even if they've got abilities, if they don't match the culture, if the company has a strong culture, then it's going to be hard for them to make it. So, um, yeah, that's good advice. So, switching gears for a second, let's talk about podcasting.
Hmm.
Why did you start a podcast? What was it about it that drew you to it?
I started a podcast because I'm an absolute show off. When I was a kid, my parents were like, Andrew, stop showing off. And podcasting and being a musician gives me a platform to show off and have it help me make money. That's probably the heart of the answer in a way. But secondly, I just dig audiovisual stuff. I'm an active musician. I'm always recording music and making short films and things. So it just aligns with me to use something I'm passionate about to promote the business. And I this is the possibly sixth or seventh podcast I've run now, because the first couple I didn't quite get it right. I ignored my own advice. So the first business podcast, I do personal ones as well, was called Internet Marketing for Humans, and it was purely focused on just breaking down myths, just explaining in the absolute simplest terms what digital marketing things meant. I did 100 episodes, I think, but they're all about an hour long, and that's too long.
Wow.
If that's too long. The next one I did, they were all very, very short, like 60 seconds. That's too short. And then this one, the Business Amplifier, I did what I teach other people to do, because it's like shoe menders. Kids always have the worst shoes. The things we know in digital marketing, we're not always very good at doing for ourselves. But the
Yeah.
Business Amplifier, I drew up a very clear ideal client avatar for it. It's a business owner who's done a bit of digital marketing and has had some success, but has hit a ceiling through time or through getting to a point where you need more technical understanding. The Business Amplifier is here to solve that. It's not necessarily for people who want to get started, although I keep it accessible. It's for people who get the value, they understand it, and the people who naturally then want to speak to people like you and look up this podcast as the next step on.
Yeah, that's it's. I mean, look, it's one of the reasons that I started mine too, because I love the opportunity to come on and talk with people. I love the ability to share stuff, and I know one of the regrets that I have in my own career is that I did things too solitary. I was too
Oh yeah.
focused on trying to get stuff done instead of building connections. And I didn't realize until later in my career the value of that, how much faster it accelerates your growth and your success. It's also a lot more fun
Mm.
when you're connecting with other people as opposed to sitting behind your desk trying to crank out work. And I said, if I went through this journey that was lonely and had a lot of struggles, I know there are tons of other people out there that are solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, that are, every single day fighting this question. Did I make a mistake trying to do this? Should I
Mm.
have just stuck with my job? Is this the right thing? Can I do this? The amount of people that have doubt about stuff that they do. And the irony with this is they will have done whatever they're doing for their own business for somebody else and been very good at it. Yet when they break out on their own and do it, they're self-conscious about it. They don't know whether they can do it. They don't know whether they'll be, and it's astounding, because when you see it from the outside, you say, how could you even question yourself? You're not breaking into something new. You're doing something you've been doing for 25 years at a really high level, but you were getting a paycheck for doing it. Now that you got to do it for yourself, the relationship changes. And people, and so that was a big, driving force for me too. I love the medium. I just think it's so much fun, and I think there's so much value in it, because it's an immersive thing where people can learn real stuff. We could we could share posts back and forth and DMs on social media, but it's superficial. You can't get in any depth that way. we come on this thing and we talk for 40 minutes. We get to know each other, right? I can ask you questions and I get an education because I can ask you whatever I want. You're on the spot. You got to do the answers. And I love that because where else would you have that opportunity? Right. So, I just, yeah, I love it too. And I'm glad that you started one as well. So you're really into music also.
Mhm.
Where does your love of music come from, if you know? And do you find that that the creative outlet for you is a balance with the business, or how does that sort of fit together in a whole in your life?
I'm not really sure why I started making music. Other same reason I started podcasting. I'm a show off. I was given the advice once: always be the least talented person in your band, and I found that really easy over the years to be the least talented person. Um, in fact, it still tessellates with my music, sorry, with my business life in quite a deep way. For one thing, everyone who works for me is a musician, and that's not by deliberate choice. I think it's a mindset thing. I think if you've played in bands, you naturally collaborate well with others. You have to. It doesn't work otherwise. But each time I start to think I'm getting a bit busy. So tonight I have a rehearsal with one of my bands. I was thinking I've got a lot of tasks I really should get done. I stop myself and say, no, part of the reason I run this business is to facilitate music, is to facilitate creating music and to feed my wife and child and pay the mortgage and all those other things. But no, it fits in quite well. And what I found is that if I look at my network as a whole, so all the people I speak to all the time, surprising number of them are musicians. I think finding a passion in common with anyone you speak to is incredibly important.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I fully agree. And I think that's great. I mean, I know a lot of people will have some sort of I'm just not that creative. This
Um,
for me is my big outlet,
Right.
but
I'm going to argue with you there. I quite often bump into people who'd say they're not creative. And I don't think it's possible to be a human being without being creative. The choices you've made in speaking to me today, the way you steered the conversation, every aspect, the t shirt you're choosing to wear, the headphones you bought, the background you have on your video call, these are all creative decisions and they all mean something. I think creativity sometimes gets confused with the ability to paint or the ability to create music. It's not. Creativity is whatever is in your soul that comes out through your actions. That's being creative. So, Brett, I'm sorry, I disagree. You are creative.
fair enough. Fair enough. I like your definition of it better because I do think you're right. I think it's sort of an antiquated idea of creativity,
Oh, yeah.
because I think of it as the ability to you know create art or create music or create these things from scratch. And I'm not creative in those ways, but at the same time, yeah, I totally feel what you're saying, and I agree. All right, so where can people find you, find your products, find your services, and connect with you?
Sure. Go to yeseo.io. That's YESIO. Or you can also find me on LinkedIn. Have a look for Andrew Laws. There's usually a picture of me holding a guitar or something. And fortunately, there's not lots of Andrew Lawses.
Well, that's good. Yeah, that makes it easy. Thanks a lot for that. All right, I have one last question I have to ask because it's important, and I'm always curious to know what everyone's going to say. And that's, what's your number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
Don't be a jerk.
I like that. You're the first one to say it, but
Oh,
I
really?
actually like, yeah.
It encompasses so much, I think.
No, it is true. I think sometimes, and this has been a theme throughout our conversation. I think sometimes it is just about simplifying stuff and just being real,
Mm.
right? I mean, we don't have to overcomplicate things. We don't have to have a representative that we pretend to be. We can just be ourselves, be good to other people, have a genuine interest in win-win sort of relationships and setups. And I think that is the best policy for anybody because it's not as tiring as trying to pretend to be something that we aren't. When you're mean to people, it's just not a great look. And so I I like that advice. Very Very succinct, very to the point, and I like it a lot. All right. That is just about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again, Andrew, so much for sharing all of your insights and great tips with us. You can visit youtube.com/@yeseo-agency for great content and to subscribe to his YouTube channel as well. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And as always, remember, no matter what you want for your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.
And don't be a jerk.